Okay, Mr. President, fellow members of Rotary Club of Wellington, the first, I understand, chartered in New Zealand. It's an honour and pleasure to be here. I have 20 minutes and I think we're all ready to go. Before I do so, let me just gauge my audience. How many of you have been to Gallipoli itself? My God, that is amazing. That's very good. I think those of you who haven't been there, I hope they'll go there sometime in the next 5-10 years, maybe. Okay, we, as the chairman mentioned, we have written several books on Gallipoli with my wife, who is with me today. And my talk will be mainly around that. This new technology I quite like because it makes life easy, so you don't have to clap. It's already done it for you. The three authors, myself and my wife, and Kevin Fuster, Dr. Kevin Fuster. I'm a chemical engineer by trade. My wife is a town planner by trade, and the only historian is Kevin Fuster, who is now the director at Greenwich Maritime Museum in London. Okay, whenever you talk about Gallipoli, or Turkey, I should say, you have to go back either a couple of thousand years, or in this case, because we don't have much time, I'll go only a couple of hundred years. Let me see if the pointer works. Yes. 17th century was the Ottoman Turkish Empire's zenith time. As you can see, the borders went all the way to Vienna on the west, all of Black Sea and north of Black Sea, east Iran, part of that, and all of the Middle East and all of North Africa was under the jurisdiction of the British, it's today, isn't it? It's the Ottoman Turkish Empire. And but that was the top. So from then on, it started declining, and come 20th century, it had lost most of those areas. And by 1915, Turkey had, I'm using Turkey as same as Ottoman Empire at this stage. Turkey had a little bit of area on the European side, all of what we call Anatolia, which is Turkey today, and all of the Middle East was under Ottoman rule. Now we know today that Middle East is important for oil. Well, at that time, also a few people knew the importance of oil, and one of them was Churchill. In 1911, Churchill said, as the Lord of the Admiralty, he was very worried about competition in Germany, switching from coal to oil burning, and they assumed that if the trend continued, they would lose the supremacy on the seas. And for the British Empire, for that to happen is not a good thing, obviously. So he said in 1911 to the Parliament, we must have access to a source of oil for the British Empire, because we don't have any. At that time, British Empire did not have any oil in its lands. So the plan, that's my take on it, was to kill the crumbling Turkish Empire and dismember it and have access to Middle East and total control of the oil. So that was, of course, not written in many places except in our book. And I mean, there are other excuses, of course, quite legitimate ones, like helping Russia and soft underbelly of Germany, etc. But I'll evolve the story a bit better later on. Okay. So in terms of Turkey and this part of the world, it's 16,000 kilometers. And as you can see, this map was drawn in by a Turkish person because it is in the center of the world, as it should be. And apologies for not having a red on New Zealand because they're a small cousin of Australia. More to come. Okay, Gallipoli is, for those who haven't been there, is near Istanbul, which was the capital of the Ottoman Empire at the time, and it is this peninsula here that is in Europe. Let's have a closer look. Ottoman Empire's capital, Istanbul, is only about 350 kilometers away from the peninsula, and it's really protected by these waterways here, called the Dardanelles. And it was an important place for the Ottoman Empire for many centuries to control, and they did so by many forts and things. And so Churchill's plan was to bring Royal Navy, British and French armadas together and attack the Dardanelles and sail past Sea of Marmara and arrive at the gates of Istanbul and lob a few 15-inch shells from Queen Elizabeth, and Turks would hoist the white flag. Now that was not a very stupid idea, because at the time, remember, Turkey has been losing wars for more than 100 years, and it had a ragtag army, an economy that was not very good at all. So the idea was hatched in London. Sorry, this is a closer look at the Dardanelles, and this is Europe, and this is Asia. This is now in 1915, and Turks heard about Churchill's plans, and not that they had a very good spy network in London, but it was in the daily tabloids every day. There was going to be a big attack on Turkey. So they laid mines across. Okay. As you can see, Dardanelles is very narrow. It's about a mile across and very easy to defend. Okay, 18th of March, a big fleet, almost as big as one that attacked Troy, came and tried to force its way through the Dardanelles. And 18 capital ships, including Queen Elizabeth, bombarded heavily from morning until late, but they hit the mines that were not known to the British. So 6 out of 18 capital ships either sank or were badly damaged. So at the end of the day, the Royal Navy, the mighty Royal Navy, had to go back. And that was unexpected. So quickly, Churchill and colleagues decided that Navy could not do it. So we had to send the army in. And who's around Gallipoli? Well, we have Anzacs at Egypt training, so we'll get them together. And then we'll have the British and French armies dedicated for this purpose, and then Indian Brigade. So in 36 days, the 80,000 troops decided that they would land, and they managed to decide on 2 high points. This is the first high point where Anzacs were supposed to capture, and this is the second high point where the British and the French would capture by attacking from the south of the peninsula. So the Anzac Cove is where the Anzac troops are supposed to land and capture the high ground. Now, Turks were not waiting at Anzac Cove because they thought that the landing, or as invasion as they call it, would happen in some places that were much easier to put your soldiers ashore. By the way, Turks were also getting ready to defend, and these are soldiers from Istanbul going to Gallipoli just before the Anzac Day. And if you look at the Anzac Cove from the sea, you can see that it's almost impossible from military terms to scale. Now, that's Anzac Cove here, and these are the ridges. So Turkish troops were about 160 and not many more, defending or just scouting the area. So Turkish troops were totally surprised when huge numbers of Anzac troops landed. 8,000 troops landed in 4 hours by dawn, just after dawn. And any Turkish troop that wasn't killed, because none was captured, they all ran back up the hill, up the ridge. Now, on the other side of the ridge, it was bad luck for Anzacs because a brilliant commander called Mustafa Kemal Atatürk was the division commander, and when he heard at dawn that there was landing, he said, this sounds like the main thing. So he put all his troops together and ran up towards the high ground. And Atatürk's troops and himself got to the high ground before Anzac troops did. And that was the deciding factor, particularly on that day. Now, when Anzacs landed, there was not much of a battle, as I mentioned. This is an actual photo. So is this one. And when Charles Bean landed at 9:30, he saw only 12 killed. So battle at Anzac Corps was a non-event. But it became extremely difficult to push from the second ridge onwards, because, as I mentioned, Atatürk's troops came. And the real battle began at the ridges. This is the walk that Mustafa Kemal did going up this country. This is Çunikbayır here, that's the high ground. And we walk up that from time to time with some friends. And he got there before Anzacs and secured the high ground. And the battle raged below Çunikbayır for at least 3-4 days. Very, very severe fighting. And this is where I took a photo from the neck. The Australians would know this much better than the New Zealanders. But we're looking towards Monash Valley. This is Monash Valley here. Now this is the ridge I was talking to you about. It goes like this. This is Lone Pine in the distance. And the east side, which is this side, was Anzac. And the other side, which is just 10 yards apart, the west side was all in Turkish hands. So you had an amazing trench battle that took place because everybody had to dig down, otherwise they would be shot at. And trench warfare signaled the stalemate. There was no movement in either direction. Turks tried to change that balance, and on 19th of May they attacked with 40,000 troops, and they were massacred. 3,000 Turkish troops lay dead 4 days in no man's land. And a truce was declared on 24th of May to bury the dead because the stench was so terrible. That's the first time when Anzacs and Turks actually met each other. Before then, they did not know each other. And the Anzacs were told that the Turks were barbaric black people. So whenever they shot a white person, they said, oh, we killed a German, because they thought Turks were dark people. And similarly, on the other side, when first Anzac soldier was captured, the soldier was taken to the commander, and Turkish commander asked, where is New Zealand? Who is New Zealander? He'd never heard of them, or Australians. Okay, so these are supplies for the Anzac troops. These are the Turkish trenches. They dug huge trenches, and you can see a horseman riding through. But the Navy was quite busy, bombarding day and night. This is in the town of Çanakkale, where it was obliterated by the Navy. So the balance did not change until August, when the High Command in London decided that we have to have another go at this. So they had a plan. Again, as all plans go, it was a good plan. I've taken this photo from near Çunikbayır, and the plan was that Suvla Bay, 20,000 British troops would land there, and then walk from the back and reach Chinook Bay. And New Zealanders would walk up this very broken country and attack by nightfall, and Australians were asked to do a diversion at Lawn Pine. And the plan went not according to plan. British 20,000 troops landed because this area was not defended all that well, but they were not given marching orders, so they sat down and brewed a cup of tea. And New Zealanders got lost in that broken country. In Australia, they told me maybe they found some sheep. Sorry about that. So Mustafa Kemal again, Lawn Pine was the only successful one, but it didn't change the balance of power at all. Mustafa Kemal again was the brilliant commander on location. He repulsed all New Zealand British troops from Chinook Bay and held the high country, but could not displace the Australians at Lawn Pine. These are Turkish trenches at Lawn Pine before it was captured. These are Turkish soldiers. As you can see, one of them is having a haircut. Obviously, they looked after themselves. These are Turkish POWs. Now, there's an interesting story about that. I'm told that New Zealanders were more gentlemen in their fighting, not like Australians, who were a bit more yobos than others. And, for example, Australians tried not to take prisoners of war, and New Zealanders did. So Turks, if they were going to surrender, they tried to make sure that it was New Zealanders they surrendered to. Okay, these are Turkish trenches again. These are Turkish supply lines. It took them a couple of weeks to go from Istanbul to Çanakkale to Gallipoli. It snowed at Gallipoli, and as if flies and bullets and shrapnel weren't important enough or difficult enough, people had to face cold. Some of them saw snow first time, especially Australians. And British High Command decided at this point that this was not going to be a war that they could win, so they were going to pull out. And that was the most brilliant part of the whole operation. Turks call it the retreat, and we don't have actually a photograph from the day, but it must be something like this. And no casualties, or hardly any casualties, were reported, because Turks did not know that Australians and New Zealanders were going to pull out. And they were very happy that that happened, by the way. Okay, now let me just give you an idea of the casualties in the 8.5 months of the war. Turks casualties, meaning killed, wounded and maimed. Turks lost 250,000 soldiers, which is unbelievable, isn't it? In today's world, we don't understand that sort of casualty numbers. Anzacs, smaller numbers, but I need to point out that New Zealanders landed about 9,000 troops at Gallipoli, and about 80%, more than 80% became casualties, which is just amazing. So everybody was killed or wounded on the New Zealand side. Allied altogether, over 200,000. So nearly 500,000 from both sides. Now the British generals are usually, in Australia, I presume in New Zealand as well, blamed for the failure, but they used not only Anzacs as cannon fodder, but their own troops as well. Look, casualty numbers are very high for the British as well. And that's the sort of scene you would see after the war. These are all soldiers of mixed background. This is 1919, when they were collected and buried en masse. The battle did not, battle at Gallipoli finished, but the war between British Empire and Ottoman Empire did not finish because it continued in the Middle East. Remember the remark I made earlier? Churchill's plan was to get hold of the Middle East. So they put another 2 years of effort to capture the Middle East, and it was successful. End of 1918, Turks capitulated, and British Empire had access to all of the Middle East, and they still do today. Okay, now the Republic of Turkey became, from the ashes of the Ottoman Empire, as what we have today. And of course, Gallipoli has left a lot of legacies, and I'll go through some of them quickly. A2 is an Australian submarine, which we wrote about, and that is something that I don't need to go much into, but it actually went through the Dardanelles on the 25th of April. Remember, Royal Navy and French Armada could not go through, but A2 did. But it was captured and it sank, and all the sailors were saved, and it was undiscovered until 15 years ago, and it is still in Turkish waters. That is A2 in 1915. That's the torpedo boat that sank it. In 1998, it was discovered, and we went there to have a look at a survey in 2007, and it's still in good condition, by the way. Now, one of the Gallipoli legacies is something that I found out when I visited South Island. This is Charles Risk, who came back from Gallipoli as a wounded person, discharged, and he was buried just south of Cromwell. One of very few people who are buried in their home soil. Most of them are overseas, and nearly 3,000 of them are in Gallipoli. Okay, this is a cannon that was captured by New Zealand mounted troops in the Middle East and brought back in 1920 as a war trophy. Okay, this is Anzac Co, and this is as it is today. Beach Cemetery is where John Simpson and the donkey is buried. Now, New Zealanders think that John Simpson was a New Zealander, and Australians think that he was Australian, but he was actually British. He jumped ship in Australia, and then when he heard that he could have a free passage back, he volunteered. But he didn't make it. This is Lawn Pine. This is memorial for the 57th Regiment, the one that stopped Anzacs reaching the high ground. They have a memorial. This is Chinook Bay Memorial. The one on the left is New Zealand, and on the right is the Atatürk's Memorial, same location. This is the memorial at Wellington. I haven't seen it yet, but I will see it one of these days. And apparently it is nearby here. Maybe you have seen it already. Okay, going back to Gallipoli is important, of course, and that's where the Anzac Day ceremonies are held every year. This is what it looked like in 1950, so not much has changed. This is in 2003, huge crowds. Same in 2007, 2009, 2010. I've been to all of these, by the way. 2012. And this is in 2005 when New Zealanders were running the show, and this is a New Zealand soldier playing the last post. And it's a very emotional ceremony. I've seen many people cry there. Now you meet interesting people on the beach. Now you know this person who's talking to you. Do you know who this one is? Right. And you know this person? Yeah. Your Prime Minister next to sleeping royalty. And that's how it happens. They lay in droves and wait for the dawn to come up. And this lemming behavior was topic of my research. And after 4 years, I concluded this was the model. How are we going with time, President? Okay? Yeah. Okay, I can't talk about that all that much, but suffice to say that we're waiting, expecting 50,000 to go to Gallipoli, but that's another story altogether. Friends of Gallipoli, that I'm the chairman of, is a charity organisation. We take students to Gallipoli every year. A couple of years ago, this is a group of students I took, and this is the next batch in 2013. Turks marched on Anzac Day in Sydney, first time when they came. Look at the banner, it's very interesting. Turkish-Australian friendship will never die. Most Turks in those days would not know that Australians, or New Zealanders for that matter, were at Gallipoli. So the friendship that was created is replicated in 1990 when John Howard took a bunch of diggers and they met their compatriots who they fought against. And I'd like to finish with the words of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk and the basis of the friendship that we all enjoy today. And this is uttered in 1934. Those heroes that shed their blood and lost their lives, you now lie in the soil of a friendly country. Therefore, rest in peace. There is no difference between the Johnnies and the Mehmets to us, where they lie side by side here in this country of ours. You, the mothers who sent their sons from faraway countries, wipe away your tears. Your sons are now lying in our bosom and are in peace. After having lost their lives on this land, they have become our sons as well. Still gives me goosebumps. Be happy to take questions. Thank you.